Good evening and welcome to Think Tank's virtual meetups for this summer season. This is an initiative which is organized by the Saudi Ministry of Communications and Information Technology, MCIT. And Think Tank aims to create a stimulating digital environment and to spread digital awareness about emerging technologies. So in this spirit, Think Tank is happy to introduce you to a series of meetups which are focused on emerging technologies. And my name is Jan Schmitz-Hübsch, and I'll be the moderator on today's session. In real life, I'm a partner at Strategy End here in the Middle East, and I've led healthcare strategy work with regulators, providers, payers, and investors in Saudi Arabia and also the wider GCC region over the past 10 or so years. And the topic for the discussion today is emerging technologies transforming healthcare. And I think one observation I would like to share is that a large part of my own work over the last 1 to 2 years, and increasingly so, has centered around research and innovation strategies about scenarios for the future of health, not just for the next 1 or 3 years, but for the next 10 years, 20 years. How to bring more science, more research, and more advanced technology into the regional healthcare systems. So I think it's a timely topic, especially since it's getting accelerated right now, being the COVID period, where a lot of the technology is being used to switch to virtual and to remote care. So I really look forward to exploring this topic together with a very high caliber panel this evening. And we, I think, have 3 very good experts to look at this from different perspectives. There's Dr. Ahmed Fair. He's the advisor for the technology and digital transformation at the Ministry of Health. We have Samah Assad, the Executive Director in the Healthcare Practice of KPMG, and Dr. Ahmed Jadallah, the founder and CEO of Phi Science Institute. So before we go into the conversation, I would just like to ask our panelists to say a few words and briefly introduce themselves. And maybe we go ahead with the ladies first. So Samah, if you want to start and introduce yourself briefly to the audience.
Thank you, Jan, and thank you for having me. My name is Samah Assad. I'm the Healthcare Director for KPMG in Saudi Arabia. I am a biochemist and have an MBA in International Business, been in the healthcare industry for about 18 years, heavy on the tech side, having spent the majority of my career in GE. I also did a bit of privatization and PPP, and last year I joined a health tech startup based out of San Francisco that does diagnostic imaging with AI. It was called Artrist, and I helped them expand their footprint to the region. A part of my focus in KPMG is health tech.
Great, thank you very much, Samah. Nice to have you this evening. Then Dr. Fair, I mean, you may not need an introduction given your work in the ministry, but if you would like to also say a few words on your end.
Thank you very much, Jan. It's really my pleasure to be with you today. Thank you for the organizing to invite me in this session. It's my name is Ahmed Fair. I am a pediatrician by profession and a health informatician. I was in charge of several positions in the Ministry of Health. I was in charge in the development of the e-health strategy since 2010, and following e-health strategy followed the transformation, the Ministry of Health transformation strategy. I work as the Director General of the National Health Information Center and as a Deputy Minister in e-health and digital transformation in the Ministry of Health. In my career, we have seen the changes over the past few years, which really affect massively whatever e-health strategy that we built before, and we see how much the emerging technology is changing what we built previously, and this is a really an important subject to think of in details.
Absolutely, absolutely. Great to have you, Dr. Fair. And then as a third panelist, last but not least, Dr. Ahmed Jadallah, joining us from Phi Science. Would you mind introducing yourself as well?
Of course. Thank you so much, Jan, and thank you. I want to thank the whole Think Tech team for putting this initiative forward. This is Ahmed Jadallah. I'm a doctor in medicine, and I'm the founder and CEO of Phi Science Institute in Jordan. We work in the field of applied research and innovation across the whole region, and now we're expanding our work to Canada as well. Aside from our applied research and innovation, mostly integrating the different technologies in different sectors, especially in healthcare. I founded the first AI lab in Jordan here. It's under FISE umbrella, so it mainly operates in the field of AI in different sectors again, but mainly 70% of our work is our own R&D, which focuses mainly on AI projects in healthcare in specific. So here, aside from managing FI, I myself am a scientist and a researcher. I don't practice medicine anymore. I'm dedicated for the different technologies in medicine, and mostly focused in some AI applications in medicine, and specific some for brain-machine interfaces, and usually some deep brain stimulation as well. Research work for Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and so on. I'm very delighted to be among this panel, and thank you again, Jan, for the introduction.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed. So I think we can really look at this topic from different perspectives, whether it's the perspective of a policymaker or a researcher or a medical doctor, an advisor. We'll have different lenses to look at today, which is great. Now, to open the conversation and to start it off, I would like to ask you to think about which of the emerging technologies that are out there today, and some of them were already mentioned when you talked about AI, or there's blockchain and big data. So to think about, like, out of this whole kind of range of emerging technologies that we see going into healthcare right now, what do you think, which technology will have the most immediate influence in the near future on the way healthcare will look like, or what's the picture in 10 to 20 years from now on how will healthcare have changed based on the emerging technologies which we see today? So I'll leave it up to you who would like to go first, maybe, to offer your view on this one. Anyone that, yeah, Dr. Fair?
Okay, thank you. I think currently we are in the era of utilizing the mobile health as well as the cloud computing. So everything is moving to the cloud or solutions and the mobile. But in the coming near future, I think with that huge amount of data in the cloud, artificial intelligence is booming, as well as the IoT. And we are expecting that these things will really massively changing the way we are providing healthcare service. For example, in the artificial intelligence, it's now coming into a lot of services related to the screening, such as the chatbot we are using it for the patient, for teletriaging, so the patient can communicate with the intelligence, and afterward the intelligence will guide the patient where to go. And also in the screening, we think that it's going to be used massively, whether imaging, screening for the imaging, like in the mammo screening, and I mean in other services like chest X-rays to rule out TB and so on. In addition to that, it's with the huge amount of data that we are aggregating from different solutions, we think that it's gonna go into the prediction as well as some sort of intelligence, patient guidance and coaching for their healthcare with the huge amount of data that we have, and might alert the patients from certain problems that he might have with the historical data that's going to be aggregated. So these two, within the coming years, they are coming after the mobile and the cloud computing. I think these two will be booming in the coming few years. They're gonna really change. The IoT part in here is we are dealing a lot with chronic disease, and the chronic disease now we are trying to really also coach them. We try to monitor them remotely, whether in home healthcare. Although now we are, for example, doing teleclinic remotely, I think we are going to have a tele like the virtual hospital remotely. So the patient is going to be some of the several cases. Among the medical services, going to be changed to be treated at home. So the patient will have a patch, going to be monitored while he is served with a home healthcare service, or for certain diseases, even he will not require hospital admission. So these things will change already now, the new model of care, but in the coming future, I think we're going to have further newer model of care based on the introduction of these technologies.
Absolutely. No, I think, and you're absolutely right when you said it depends a bit on the availability or readiness of technology. So I guess what we'll see in the short term are those applications or use cases that are based on existing technology or technology that is basically ready to be used, whereas others where the technology will first have to be ready to operate at scale will probably be pushed out a little bit longer. Also turning it maybe to Dr. Ahmed or Samar, what's your angle on this in terms of which technology do you think will dominate the way healthcare will look like?
Yeah, I can go. I agree with you, Dr. Balkhair. I think there's a huge migration to virtual care. I think, using chatbots to book appointments or having virtual consultations became much easier for patients. And it sort of spiked in many places around the world. In the UK, for example, they say we were able to do in 5 weeks what we weren't able to do in 5 years in terms of acceleration of digital and digital adoption and care in general. But in my opinion, I think in the coming 10 to 20 years, technology will be able to closely monitor our health through wearables, implantables, connected devices and self-care apps. And I think there will be a flood of data that will feed AI, that will probably serve as, personal doctors or personal AIs that you could access around the clock, and will provide you with sort of an optimal answer for your healthcare questions. I think, with the aging population, the world is aging. I think there will be a need for us to rely more on technology to fill the gap in terms of workforce productivity, and I think technology is going to help us sort of bridge this gap when it comes to traditional tasks being completely replaced by automation and AI. I can elaborate more, but I want to give Dr. Ahmed the chance to also share his opinion.
Yeah, thank you, Samar. Well, I cannot agree more with what my fellow panelists has mentioned already. They covered a huge spectrum of the technologies that are reshaping healthcare and the future of it. But maybe if I want to mention the most, let's say the most important discoveries that are happening right now worldwide, I want to mention one in diagnostics and one in treatment. And these are mainly the two elements of healthcare. Like most of the innovation happens either in diagnostics, meaning you want to reach the degree of preemptive medicine. You want to discover the disease before it happens, and maybe if it happened, there is another way to treat it. So in the diagnostics area, maybe the most important application is coming from computer vision and the different diagnosis of imaging. So radiology is being disrupted massively at the time being. That's a huge area where AI in specific is getting into diagnostics in radiology in specific, and maybe on the treatment side where there's a huge innovation where no one usually mentions, because it's not as fancy, let's say, but the work that is currently happening in drug discovery is massive. So the amount of investments that are happening from pharmaceutical companies in putting AI into drug discovery is huge, and the amount of time that is being reduced at the time being in the usual drug discovery cycle is being minimized to an extreme minimal, and this would shape the way we treat our patients in a drastic way that we cannot even imagine. Shortening, like just what Samar just mentioned, shortening the discovery cycle of a drug from 12 years to maybe 12 months. That's a drastic change when it comes to the price of these drugs, how fast we're discovering them, how fast we're discovering they're interacting for other diseases, or how they interact with other drugs as well. So drug discovery is a huge area where AI is playing a massive role, and I think it's one of the biggest areas at the time being.
Excellent. Yeah, I think a good takeaway here, which I see, is that there are some areas of where technology is advancing, which is driven purely by the readiness of or the availability of the technology itself, as you mentioned, in drug discovery, because in imaging, because the readiness of, let's say, AI and deploying AI is there. So it's already being put to use in imaging, it's being put to use in drug discovery. And then the other way that technology will probably play a role is from a needs perspective. So which areas are in need of more efficiency, are in need of more accuracy, and then the researchers will focus on the areas, the technology that will address those needs. So it's kind of one way for technology driven, the other one's more needs driven. And that kind of leads us also to one other angle of the discussion, because today is actually Alzheimer's Day, to kind of bring this disease into the spotlight. And it's maybe not something which has been talked about a lot in terms of using technology, because as you said, the advancements have happened in imaging, they happened in oncology also, and in other care domains where there have been interesting use cases already driven, not just by the traditional players, but also by the likes of Google or IBM going into this healthcare space. Now, Alzheimer's is, however, from a needs perspective, a disease which has a lot of unmet need, because already today there are more than 50 million people globally who suffer from Alzheimer's or some other severe sort of dementia, and anywhere between 5 to 10% of people who are above 60 can expect to be diagnosed with Alzheimer's at some point, which is putting a huge strain not just on the immediate families, because it's not a great disease to have, of course, for someone at that age, but also on the healthcare system. So what's your view specifically if you think about how can emerging technologies also help to more accurately, effectively, or also maybe less costly treat Alzheimer's, prevent Alzheimer's, because at this point there's no cure, right? It's not yet curable. So it's also about avoiding the existence, stopping the progression, and enabling people to lead a relatively normal life. So what's your view on a disease like Alzheimer's? How would emerging technology help in this case?
Yeah, I can go. So I think there's two ways to think about it. One is the leverage of data, and two would be implantables. And in terms of the leverage of data, it could be with or without technology. So without technology, data scientists or scientists could analyze, behavior versus the physical condition of the patient. So to give you an example, we could detect speech I'll give you a very good example, actually. The former president of the USA, Reagan, died of Alzheimer, but they were able to diagnose through his public speeches that he had early signs of Alzheimer because of his use of minimal vocabulary, simplistic language. So if that was done earlier, he would have been diagnosed early on and he would have been treated better. So that's one. Now, if we leverage data and technology together, for example, when using Google Maps, they could analyze, for example, their awareness in terms of directions, their cognitive decay or deterioration in general, when using these apps is another indication. And if you think about it, this is not a very expensive thing to analyze data through technology or without. The other one was announced recently, I think in July. It's a company by Elon Musk, and it's called Neuralinks. I'm not advertising it, but it's a chip that it is implanted in the brain, and what it does is basically it can be done in a day by a robot. And it controls the signals of the neurons, so it predicts them. It reads the information early on, so it knows what's going to happen or where the action is going to go. So the way he's thinking of it in terms of range of treatments, it could treat irreversible things like blindness, like paralysis, but also memory loss. So I thought it was quite interesting how he described it. It's like restoring memory and then replaying it again in the patient's brain. So imagine what this would do for patients with dementia. It's in terms of cost, and you mentioned being effective and cost efficient. So it's expensive, obviously. Now it's still in trial, but the target for it is to become $2,000 per patient. So that's going to be quite disruptive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, more accessible for sure. Dr. Balkheira or Dr. Ahmed, anything that you would like to add to this one?
Maybe I can go. Well, for AI applications in Alzheimer's are there is a huge spectrum of these applications. Maybe Samah mentioned the most interesting ones, to be honest. Trying to employ these emerging technologies like Google Maps and so on to early diagnose them. But maybe one of from the side of the most straightforward applications is that there are many research groups at the time being worldwide. They're working on the early diagnosis, mostly using MRI. Like MRI is a type of imaging for the brain. It's like there are multiple types like X-ray or CT scans. MRI is one of them. And MRI, the great thing about MRI is that there's no radiation in it. So you're preventing the other side effects of CT scan, for example. And utilizing MRI, a group of scientists, and I think it's Boston University. They could diagnose future Alzheimer patients. And there is another group I remember from University of California, San Francisco, I believe. They diagnosed it 6 years in advance. 6 years, utilizing another type of imaging called PET scans, which utilizes glucose for medical imaging. They could diagnose Alzheimer's patients 6 years in advance. Now, many people say there is no cure for Alzheimer's. So why is that important? So what's the benefit of knowing it? Now many pharmaceuticals companies are discovering drugs that, if they are used early on, like even at the very early stages of the disease, these drugs might be highly effective. But when you start these drugs when the disease is starting, it almost goes in vain. So for Alzheimer's disease, it's right that we don't have a medical cure at this moment, but having these early diagnosis is extremely crucial for these patients. So this is one aspect. The second important aspect as well, and I'm going to end there, maybe it goes into the area of genomics, which is very important. Like genomics comes from our ability of sequencing the whole genome of humans, and this goes back to 2003, the first time we could do that. But now we could study the genes and that would lead to dementia, and specifically Alzheimer's disease. And these are multiple genes. So having these, and because there are multiple genes, it makes the disease not straightforward, makes it very complicated. And the interactions between these genes makes things even more complicated. So now, so this makes it very hard for humans to just detect these interactions, the complexities of these interactions. And this is something that, of course, the machine would do with enough processing power and very good algorithms. So that's what we're doing now. Now, we're trying to, the future would be, like, the future is moving towards precision medicine. That's definitely the fact. Like tailored treatment for each patient, and tailored, like knowing what's the future of diseases that these patients might have. And having all these complexities coming from genomics, transcriptomics, and proteomics, all these complexities, AI can now analyze it and see patterns that humans could not see before, and predict that certain people might have Alzheimer's in the future. And maybe we could predict that like 20 or 30 years in advance. And you can know that, or at least these patients would be susceptible for that in the future. Now that would change the whole scene for the disease in a totally different way from how we used to deal with it in a very reactive way. Now we could approach Alzheimer's, which is one of the most devastating. It's not only devastating for the patients, it's very devastating for their families as well. And AI can change that forever. So yeah, that's my contribution.
Excellent, excellent. And I think it sounds like both from you, Samar, as well as Dr. Ahmed, you see immediate potential mostly in the very, very early detection, whether it's through the genes or other patterns that the patient displays to catch this disease extremely early on and then manage it from there. So I'm curious to see what Dr. Bakher, what you would like to add on this topic of how to use technology in this space.
I think now the thing that Elon Musk, when he came with the idea of implanting those sensors in the brain, it was something looks so strange. But tens of years ago, when we started to collect for the ECG only from 12 leads, almost most of the cardiac diseases we can diagnose, and most of even of the structural cardiac disease, not only the arrhythmias that we can diagnose from those seeing the heart from different dimensions with these ECG, and thinking that implanting this in the brain will let us really, with the power of AI, to analyze the unstructured stream of multimedia that we are receiving from the brain. We could correlate that with other inputs, with other problems that we know about this patient, whether it's a disease somewhere or it is an organic problem. So, which is something gonna be strange now with the cars. We are from the board or the motherboard, from the screen, we can discover all the problems, and how come from the brain that we can identify most of the unknown disease. And the brain is one of the complex structures in the human body, and it's most of and many diseases in the CNS is not understood, very well understood. Neither the pathophysiology of the disease nor even the treatment that we are giving, how is it really working, and by having a better understanding the situation, I think with the presence, the timing is excellent to utilize the wearable or the sensors in correlation with AI, in addition to many other sources of data that belong to that patient. Will let us understand the disease much better, and even understand when we start treatment, pushing toward the personalized treatment.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Now, obviously, when it's not just for Alzheimer's, but also for other technologies, the question is why maybe some of them have not yet gone into the actual practice, so to the extent they could have, or have not yet scaled up. And there could be many reasons why not. So what would be interesting to look at is maybe what are some of the biggest hurdles or challenges still to leverage these technologies faster, whether it's for Alzheimer's or for others. What are the kind of challenges or hurdles that need to be overcome, whether it's on the kind of licensing and regulatory side, or on the reimbursement side, on the acceptance side of patients, data privacy? I think there are many topics one can think of. And so I'm curious to see where you see the biggest hurdles or challenges of using those technologies that may be already available more widely.
I think maybe I'll start with this, that when we started initially the telemedicine, all of us in all the countries, we have a lot of challenge just to convince the practitioners as well as the patient to utilize this technology. And now I think COVID have made a lot of support to us to push most of these technology forward. And most of the hospitals, we found that huge percentage of the cases can be served remotely. And also it pushed even the regulators to quickly start, for example, working in whatever licensing required, how it should be approved, whether it's a technology like artificial intelligence, or if you are using an IoT for remote patient monitoring, or if we are utilizing some of the ready artificial intelligence solution. And on the other hand, that the regulators start to work on how the clinical practice is going to be when we start to use it remotely. Is it going to be overused, or do we have limitations? And from that angle, are we going to create, for example, new coding that are specially made for these services? And how it's going to be priced? So even the other parties of the financial, when we started here in Saudi, we found that there is still no regulation that help us to start the telemedicine services, and it usually have requirements pre, during, and after. So pre-starting any services, we would like to have the clinical regulations, like having the physician or the practitioner to be licensed, the one who is behind the screen, or if he's behind doing any procedures or doing the remote triaging or monitor. And the entity who is providing healthcare service should be also licensed. And we were using any technology, whether a teleradiology, whether it's telesurgery, or using the teleclinic. We would like to have the technology using the sufficient medical legally approved. I cannot read an images which is not DICOM format. It's not specific resolution that are needed. I cannot do a telesurgery when I don't have enough the precise required latency in the connectivity, as well as the bandwidth that's needed, and so on. So in the technology part, it requires some specification. The artificial intelligence, to be approved, it's considered a machine, and it requires, similar to licensing of the medications or medical device, it requires sort of a licensing. To speed up these processes, we have to create that policy, and COVID helped to push most of these things to go forward quickly. And I believe that now build the foundation that are many of the coming technologies going to be quickly evaluated and approved. Everybody is seeing really the benefits that's coming with this emerging technology.
Excellent. What's your view, Samah or Dr. Ahmed, on the same, in terms of the challenges that would need to be overcome in order to more rapidly use these technologies already today?
Yeah, I could build on Dr. Ahmed's point. I think with the teleconsultations, I heard firsthand from doctors things like, am I doing the right thing while running the consultation virtually? So these sort of guidelines that, I think protects the patient as well from a patient privacy perspective is very vague at the moment, and it requires a lot of work, in my opinion. But I also would highlight what I faced when I was doing diagnostic imaging with AI last year. I think the biggest hurdle was the leverage of data. I think data is treasure, but it's not securely managed, kept, or it's not clean as well. And also cloud computing was a very big issue, the leverage of cloud computing, and then the flow of data as well, all the governance and the regulations around that was very stringent. It's not a criticism, but we still rely on physical servers in almost all of the government. So I think these are all hurdles that would stand in our adoption of these disruptive technologies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in my opinion, there is still some limitations in the technology itself. So everyone, wherever you go now, you hear the word AI. You hear some symbols. You hear some terminologies that are a bit like artificial general intelligence and so on. But to be honest, some of our views to these technologies might be inflated. Our expectations are bigger than what they really are. So somehow there are some limitations to the technologies themselves, especially when it comes to some complicated matters. Although the future might change that drastically with the establishment now of quantum computers, quantum cloud computing. There is a whole field that's called quantum machine learning that is changing a lot of these restrictions. So that's one. The second thing might be, which I'd like to mention here, maybe to bring it to the table, is like there is some ethical boundaries still. So somehow, all these issues goes they go to policies as well, but the problem is like people would still feel unsafe. Like that's because many of my panelists mentioned telemedicine. So we have been working on establishing a project where a machine would, if I'm a patient at the middle of the night, I wanna reach a doctor. Instead of reaching a doctor, I would just want to open an application on my mobile, and this machine would have a huge extent where it can help me in diagnosing myself, maybe, and knowing how do I need to go to a doctor or not, and that would have a huge big data implemented into that machine as well. But the problem is many people still don't trust this machine because maybe of somehow an ethical consideration. Another big issue goes into surgery, for example. Before 5G, utilizing robots in surgery was extremely prohibited. Now, after 5G, many regulations are being formulated. Many ideas are being implanted with how remote surgeries can be done. But still, people would still face many difficulties of how they can trust. What if an error happened? What if this machine went into and saw an appendicitis that has never healed before and made a mistake? Who would you blame at that moment? So there are many ethical considerations to be considered as well before inputting all these technologies into action.
Yes, no, absolutely. And I think it's not just true in healthcare, right? If you think about autonomous cars, autonomous driving, there's also been huge debates about the liability and who's going to be taken to court for something that goes wrong there. Is it the driver? Is it the manufacturer? Is it the software developer? And the same is true also for healthcare. I would like to use the opportunity to loop in a question.
May I add, Jean?
Yeah, Dr. Bacher, please go ahead first.
If I may add, some of the things that we have to develop, as Dr. Ahmed mentioned, is the guideline with the Sibahi here in Saudi, who are responsible for how is the clinical practice should be, like JCI and so on. And we have a committee where we work in how this telemedicine should be practiced to have sort of a guideline. And conjoining with that, we start to develop online courses under Saudi Council for healthcare specialization. And this is to train the physicians to understand the different categories of the technology and to know that there are limitations in that technology. And he should not expect that it's going to be used in each and every case. He should not expect that it's going to be helpful for all categories of cases. We know that it's going to be used in many dimensions, like in psychiatry, in many things that have been used massively, and it was very comfortable with the patients. But still, we needed to understand also for each specific technology, it have certain requirements. That types of education as well as guidance to avoid really overuse this technology until it's mature enough. And at the same time, we have this CCHI, which is the Commission for Health Insurance. They work to create new codes for the system, because the insurance companies, with the private healthcare sector, they start to provide these services online, and they would like to price these services, and it's going to be maybe used 24/7. So we would like to see to put sort of a regulation also from the insurance point of view. So all dimensions, actually, even during COVID, while everybody is trapped at home, several committees was running just to settle these components because it's a need, but we would like to regulate it to avoid any harm to the patients.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the last few months have really shown also the more practical challenges of leveraging something very quickly and leveraging something quickly that's more or less ready, but which cannot be paid or where there's no legal basis to provide it. And I think the positive or encouraging sign is that it was possible, right? A lot of corners were cut, a lot of flexibility was displayed in order to leverage this very quickly because there was a strong need. I would like to take the opportunity to loop in one question which we received, and feel free to send us your questions through the comments or the Q&As so we can answer them towards the end of the panel. But there was one question which I think fits very nicely into this discussion about the challenges going back to the cloud-based solutions, which also Dr. Fair mentioned in the beginning, and what are some of the challenges, either from a patient privacy or data security perspective, the infrastructure for a broader application of cloud-based solutions, and what can be done about this. So maybe that's something to explore, since that question came. How do you see this situation for cloud-based solutions specifically when it comes to the challenges to roll this out more widely?
Okay. We are moving to the cloud-based solution massively in the kingdom, as it's one of the strategic components, as it will help us actually to be able to expand easily, to operate with a lesser or more efficiently, as well as to convert projects into an OPEX rather than CAPEX. At the same time, we have what's called clusters, which is a full region with 16, 20 hospitals that are operating the same health information systems, and they would like to work with the primary health care in a seamless or in a continuum of care in an easy mode. Actually, we rely on the strong infrastructure in the kingdom. We have dual connectivity for every hospitals in the MOH private cloud. And we have a private cloud where we are hosting these solutions. We are not hosting it in a public cloud. And of course, because due to regulation, it should be in the kingdom, as well as we do it in a private cloud connected using the private network cloud of the ministry. And in this way, we try to isolate as much as we can our the solutions in a secured manner. And since it's a private cloud with this huge size, it's recommended to be in a private cloud where it's gonna be more secured. The size is more efficient to invest as a private cloud, as well as the security issues, and that help us actually also when we have futuristic projects like an AI solutions. We have now 9 cardiac centers utilizing the same solution. We are moving them now to be in the cloud. I don't know any country who have this amount of data that's going to be hosted in one site. So building an AI on top of that will be great. Also, we have huge back solutions that are going to be implemented across the kingdom. We do it in a form of a zone. So each 4 to 6 clusters is going to have the same back solutions, at least, if not more. We are going to generate around 37 million image a year with that project. And I think that's why one of the most important things in the future is when we are running in a cloud, and it's not the efficiency, it's also the future thinking of how we are planning to have an AI ready data points in our solutions, and to have this data, if it's an imaging, to be labeled and in a way that really will support it, because this is the future oil, as we believe.
From the perspective of a researcher, maybe Dr. Ahmed, and leveraging cloud-based solutions or data in the cloud more effectively, where do you see challenges on doing this more readily?
Yeah, well, maybe the biggest challenge for individual researchers and scientists goes down to cost, which is somehow it's not something that's usually considered. Like everyone want to work on the cloud, but when you try to do it, like we have in our lab, for example, we use cloud services all the time, which is something that many researchers do. But sometimes when you use, let's say, the most famous platforms out there, sometimes the amount that you spend in a year is enough for you to establish a whole offline 10 server amount of that would help you for the next 10 years to do some research. So that's a challenge for individual and researchers, and it's not only in our lab. I see it worldwide. It's something that's there. Although the amount of flexibility and the amount of it's extremely agile to work on the cloud, especially when you work with multiple research groups from all over the world or multiple business people from all over the world. That's something that's definitely a plus, but the price is definitely a challenge. The second biggest thing, of course, is privacy, and maybe Dr. Fair mentioned that implicitly that if let's say if I'm a ministry, I would worry so much about all this data that's coming from all the centers in my country. So there are multiple levels of privacy and security to establish some solutions in the cloud, but definitely the privacy issue is there for the cloud solutions. So this is what usually comes to my mind. Maybe unfortunately, being a doctor in medicine and having many fellow scientists, they don't know how to deal with cloud solutions. So that's something, maybe a difficulty as well for scientists that are not domain experts in IT or in AI in specific. So that's another thing because cloud computing is relatively new, and many people don't know how to deal with it or what are the services out there. So this is maybe awareness is a very difficult challenge as well.
Very good, very good. Now, that's challenges, right? That's hurdles that we have. Let's also talk about what can be done to accelerate those and to overcome the hurdles. What can the different stakeholders do? And here, it's really something which cuts across. There are certain things that the regulator needs to do in order to set the policy, to set the regulation, to enable this. But then there are also the payers who need to find reimbursement mechanisms in order to pay for these services and bring them into the proper kind of payment like CCHI does in Saudi, and the providers to adapt this, tech companies to be ready to offer. What's your view on maybe what are the priorities for the different players in order to overcome the hurdles? And maybe Samah, looping you back into the conversation here as well. What's your view on what can be done to overcome the challenges?
Yeah, thank you, Jan. I think I'll speak from a provider or government standpoint. I think governments can drive innovation by incubating these type of disruptive technologies. So they're taking part early on from the time of inception, so they could formulate their regulations, they could revisit their policies and frameworks and help drive this better. So I think that would help overcome these hurdles. Since it's still booming, we've been forced to accelerate because of COVID. We had no choice, but I think it's still booming. So we still have room to do that.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Ahmed or Dr. Balkhair, where do you see the priorities on how to address this?
Yeah, I think, the world before COVID is unlike after COVID. So it's really waking up everybody, and this technology were available since before, and most of it at least. But now, so most of us work hard in the previous, months to either to finalize whatever available or to start the things that are missing. So that in the privacy, confidentiality, security, there were many policies previously built by National Health Information Center with National Health Information, and also areas related to the policies. And also, when we think of the clinical practice, as I mentioned, there are committees working on that with Sibahi. In the pricing, CCHI is working on that, as well as the Digital Academy with the Saudi Health Commission for Healthcare Specialization. They are working for the training courses, especially for some areas. And I think it will not stop over there. And I think also the factories also worldwide, they were developing certain technologies for certain disease, and now new requirements coming. So they are redesigning and rebuilding things. We were using, for example, cardiac or patient monitoring devices that monitor around 6 vital signs, but it doesn't include the oxygen saturation. And currently with COVID, we need oxygen saturation. So some of them, they change, and they are trying to repurpose these things. So I'm seeing also even technology companies are re-looking into the situation and doing their changes.
Exactly. Thank you, Dr. Bkhair, for your last point, because I see maybe skipping the hurdles in two main areas. The first one is establishing collaboration. And this happens not only by the role that the government is playing, like the one in Saudi Arabia, for example, and they're doing an amazing work. It comes from collaboration between private sector companies and especially the big ones, the governments, the universities, the research organizations, and so on. And this collaboration will definitely help us face all these difficulties. And the second thing is investing in the younger generation and investing in cultivating talent. So this is one of the biggest areas where are being overlooked, maybe in our part of the world, like all these emerging technologies worldwide. But unfortunately, the amount of investment in the younger generation is still minimal. However, in Saudi Arabia, they're already taking a huge stand on that. Like we work with the Ministry of Communication and Transport, and they're doing an amazing work in training thousands of students, young employees, in all these emerging technologies. And this is a huge aspect of facing all these difficulties, like investing in human talent.
I think this leads to an interesting question around maybe the competitive advantages or the situation in the GCC in Saudi Arabia specifically, because from my own experience in working not just in the GCC, but also more developed and more mature healthcare systems in Europe and North America, I think sometimes the challenge is that these systems are so mature and you have so much legacy in these systems and so many established stakeholders with their interests that it's very difficult to move the needle, because it's already so established that changing it is a big effort. It's a big task, and you have to align with so many different bodies and interests that it's moving at a very low pace. So to some extent, you could argue that in the GCC, since the healthcare systems are still emerging and upcoming, it's easier to change things still and to do these kind of transformational reforms as we see them today in Saudi and elsewhere. What's your view on how maybe quickly or in what position are the GCC countries to leverage these technologies maybe even faster and leapfrog what mature systems look like?
I believe actually in GCC countries that and maybe mainly also in Saudi, that with the Vision 2030, all ministries are working together in an integrated vision, and really they are working even in their execution strategy in an integrated strategy. And also the Ministry of Communication, who is in charge of the foundation of these things, since long time, they are working ahead in making the foundation or the infrastructure in an enough strength that can cope with whatever things are required. And so many regulations in how even the telecom providers can collaborate to have a better coverage, the best bandwidth. And that's why we are scaling, and I mean, in the international evaluation, we are getting more steps forward in the international level. And at the same time, you know, when we have now we have more than 6 million students at home, they are all receiving their classes remotely. And imagine how much this infrastructure supported that, in addition to all other businesses. This is from one point of view. On the other hand, this also integrated strategy where all the ministries are working together. We have National Transformation Unit, the National Digitization Unit, which is working with at the ministerial level. So ministries are member in that committee, where they work together to collaborate and assure the strategic services that are directed toward the customer, the clients, the citizen, is at the optimum level. So we started several, I mean, on all the ministries, several apps or solutions that are hitting directly the patient, engaging directly the client, and like Sahha app that we have, where the patient can take consultation from on a video conference. And similarly, other ministries, they have done the same. So this sort of way of thinking, where we'd like to engage our clients with their apps to seek to access all their services, with the best quality, best efficiency, and the best safety. This mode of thinking really make everything easy and let everybody collaborate to achieve that.
Great. And I think, Dr. Ahmed, since you also are active not just in the region, but also, you mentioned Canada, the countries, if you compare the situation, what's your view on the advantages in the GCC in Saudi Arabia versus elsewhere?
Well, maybe that's not my main expert, but the area of expertise. I mean, but a great advantage that the GCC countries has is like they have a huge amount of young potential from the younger generation, and a huge amount of untackled problems, right? And what's so special about these problems is that they are extremely localized to the region. And if we are working with these young potential and young talent, and let them focus on solving these issues that are stemming from our part of the world and this region. And most of these problems are very localized when it comes, let's say, to energy, to temperature, to healthcare systems, to cultural matters. Many of these problems are localized. And when it comes to like the Arabic language, and there are multiple areas of innovation where there's untackled potential there, where our younger generation and younger researchers and scientists, if we enrich them enough, can play a huge role in that area. So maybe this is one of the great advantages that GCC countries has over the other parts of the world where are maybe more advanced or more developed in these technologies.
Young demographics, yeah, for sure, for sure. Now, since we're kind of coming to close on this, but there's still some more time also to answer questions. Would also like to encourage, if there are any questions that you would like to answer, we'll cover some of the ones that came already. But if you have anything else, then please feel free to submit more questions there. The last kind of thing that I would like to ask from my end to the panelists here, and again, maybe we'll go and start with Samah here. If you had one or two wishes that you could personally wish for the future of emerging technology in healthcare, what would you like to see? What would you wish for to happen?
Thank you, Jan. I think for us to become symbiotic with the machine or technology. So rather than the famous question of will AI replace radiologists or humans? Why not use it to upskill? Why not collaborate with it to increase our productivity? Why don't we use it to provide a better patient experience? I used to use this when I'm referring to my time in diagnostic imaging and AI. When I would explain the platform, I used to always say to the radiologists, think of this platform, AI platform, as a resident that you trained so well and you have access to around the clock. And this resident will give you an accuracy rate of above 95% and in 10 seconds. So I think, and this can be leveraged all across the health continent, not just in radiology. That's my wish.
Thank you. Definitely an inspiring wish right there, somewhere. Dr. Ahmed, what's your wish for the future?
Go ahead, both of us are Ahmed.
Again, Dr. Ahmed Bkhair, go ahead, please.
Yeah.
If I have two wishes, actually, I would like to ask all healthcare organizations when they implement health information systems to have it an AI ready, because this is going to be near in the future. So whatever data they are aggregating, whatever they need to be AI compatible, and in the near future, what's mentioned by Samar, that we try to market usually the AI as an augmentation for the physician. So it's just supporting him. I was telling my colleagues to convince them that if you are receiving a call at night, you don't have all the data. You are just asking some questions and giving some answer. You are not examining, you're not doing many things. So the AI can be even more strict in these questions, and you will not be emotional, and he might give more even accurate support in that regard. So I try just to give an example for this. The other wish is that I wish to have more development in the IoT. I believe that will transform the new model of care that we are thinking now into a newer one, and I think most of the hospitalized patients will not be hospitalized maybe in the future. I think we're gonna have more stronger coaching. I think also the areas of the sensors gonna be more and more advanced to sense many things with non-invasive, matter, which will really aggregate huge amount of data that gonna help us in for a better life.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Bakher. Now, Dr. Jadallah, from your side, what's your wish?
Yeah, maybe Jan, before I talk about my wishes, there's a question in the Q&A that I'd like to answer, which is about the maybe the emerging technologies in mental health, and this is a question that I'm usually asked, that where does mental health stand, and in that regard, it's like mental health is one of the most complicated areas in medicine in specific, and AI is very short on that. But maybe there are many great applications now utilizing some computer vision and NLP technologies in trying to early diagnose some psychiatric disorders. Like for example, there's many softwares with cameras, like it can read all your facial expressions, how you say some things, and it detects your pitch of voice, and it analyzes all that, and it helps psychiatrists and it helps psychologists identify the state of that patient in a specific, and in that area there is a huge potential for mental health. How it's not only the psychiatrist that now is playing a role, but the augmentation between these two. So I wanted to highlight that question. Thank you for the one who answered, for the one who asked. Sorry. For my wishes, maybe I only have one wish, where my dream for medicine in like the next 50 years, maybe before we die, hopefully, is like we want to reach a state of complete preemptive medicine. Medicine would reach a degree where we won't talk about cancer. We won't talk about treatment. Imagine your body having all these biomarkers, having all these biosensors that are moving in your blood, detecting any new formation of cancer, detecting any unneeded inflammation, detecting an extra dose of something. And it alarms you. It tells you that there's this cell that is starting to form to be a tumor in the future that might be cancerous. Maybe you need to start looking into that. Maybe one day we'll reach a level of gene modification where we won't need to keep all these diseases in our bodies even. So all this is part of what we call preemptive medicine. It's like we wanna reach a degree where we don't want to treat any patient. We want to have 0 patient hospitals, and reaching that would take a huge amount of work and a huge amount of dedication from the healthcare sector and many others, but it's coming. And when that day comes, that's the day where we're gonna say that medicine really did it, and either AI and all the future technologies change how we perceive ourselves, our bodies, in a total different way forever.
That's a very powerful statement. I think that's almost something to end this panel on, but I also want to use the chance, because there are more questions that came through, and thank you very much for picking up on the mental health one already. I think on the mental health one, I also wanted to add one thing from my angle, because we've actually been looking into mental health quite a bit over the past year, because it really seems to be one of the emerging topics also in terms of the needs and the realization that something can be done about it here. One of the big issues around mental health is also stigmatization, where either people are not aware or don't want to be aware, or if they are aware, they are shy to seek treatment or to even step forward and say, I have a problem, or I would like to seek help here. And I think this is something which will be a lot better with technology, when you do not necessarily need to step out and seek a physical mental health professionalist or practitioner in a clinic, where you don't have the same kind of privacy in the community and people might know or might learn. So the easier access to either a real person through remote channels, or also, as you said, a chatbot or some other kind of virtual sources of support, I think will greatly benefit especially the mild forms of mental health, which are not completely like acute or psychotic where it's evident. And in order to make sure a lot more people are ready to seek help and are ready to seek support. And another dimension, I think, is also that currently there are also, from a supply perspective, that not that many mental health professionals here in the region who are ready to cater to this need. So it's also through the technology, of course, possible to decouple this from the physical capacity of a physician or psychiatrist, and either leverage expertise from other countries, or again through virtual solutions that do not require an actual psychiatrist to treat. So I think mental health is, to me, not maybe in the immediate short term, but definitely in the midterm, one of the areas that will benefit a lot from this, especially because there's such an unmet need in the region, and something which can be tackled. So thanks for the question. I think it's a very relevant one. The other question that we can maybe also touch upon briefly is around the AI maturity in Saudi Arabia. So it's a question to Dr. Balkhair, where you specifically see the AI maturity today in the KSA, in the kingdom.
In KSA now, we are strategically focusing on the AI. We have association in North Sadaya, which is one of the big organizations specifically built for the information and artificial intelligence. And similarly, many organizations or ministries working hard to develop teams that are data scientists in this field. And this is one of the fields that really the needs in the coming futures will be so high. And I believe that among the data that we are, the projects that we are doing in the Ministry of Health, and other healthcare sector, I think the areas where it shows the initial benefits, quick benefits, as mentioned by Samar and my colleagues, is the areas of imaging, and also the chatbot in imaging. By the way, even for the retina, we need to, for example, to do a regular retinal screening for the diabetic patients, and we have millions of diabetic patients in the kingdom, and they need to do this regularly. How to do it unless you are utilizing the AI? So the areas that we are seeing successful near practice, we are starting with it. And as we are developing our capabilities and teams here in the kingdom.
Very good, very good. Anything that you would like to add, Samar or Ahmed, to this question?
Yeah, I can't add much more to Dr. Ahmed, but I would say we're, in terms of maturity, I would say we're in early stage in terms of adoption and utilization. I think Dr. Ahmed spoke about the foundation, which is, we're moving towards it as well. I think, the reason for this delay is primarily, I think, is the cloud. Because you need cloud computing and certain configurations in the cloud for the speed that AI requires to produce results. So I would say I don't want to say infancy, but I would say in an early stage. We're heading there.
Yeah,
agree with you.
Excellent, excellent. Then I think on this note, we can probably wrap the conversation up, given that we covered a lot of the ground, and I also see that we answered the questions that came up. There was one more question regarding the contact details of the panelists, which I guess can be shared through the organizer, if you'd be so kind to do so. For me personally, I think there are a number of takeaways from the conversation today. Of course, the unanimous decision or kind of agreement among the panelists, which is not a surprise, that yes, emerging technology will play a big role in healthcare, so which kind of confirms that this topic is extremely relevant. And also that there are already many initiatives that are starting at the kind of grassroots level, have started to scale up, have been accelerated over the coming months, and therefore probably, as you said, the world after COVID is not like the world before COVID. So I think especially when it comes to embracing the technology, understanding it's not just something which will happen but needs to happen is a lot more imminent now. So my take maybe on the future is that immediate future is that we will see a lot more of those applications happening than we thought would be possible, because a lot of the technology is in fact already ready today. And if the stakeholders can come together to agree on the right kind of regulation and reimbursement environment, I think we will see a lot of interesting initiatives over the coming months and 1 to 2 years already in practice. So let's watch this space. I'm sure if we repeat this panel in a year's time, we would already have a lot more to talk about in terms of what actually has happened and not just what we wish for. And on this note, I would like to thank the panelists, Dr. Fair, Dr. Jadallah, Samah Assad, for their time today. I hope you found it useful and inspiring in your daily work and in what you can do to further accelerate the technology in healthcare. And thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you so much, Jan.
So much. Pleasure to be with you tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Pleasure to be with you.